All right, so get this. We've got two congressional bills, and get this, they've got the same name.
Oh, wow.
DHS Joint Task Force's Reauthorization Act of 2024. One's from the House and one's from the Senate.
Okay.
You think they would at least change a word or two, right? But no, they're basically identical.
Yeah, what's intriguing about this isn't just some kind of bureaucratic quirk, right?
Right.
This kind of similarity across chambers, usually it means that there's some shared sense of urgency, Congress is clearly sending us a message about these joint task forces.
So it's not just like a routine reauthorization. There's more to this than meets the eye.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm interested.
Yeah.
So let's break down like why these bills are causing such a stir.
Okay.
For starters, you mentioned these joint task forces.
Yeah.
For those of us who haven't spent years, in D.C., can you remind us what those are and why they're important?
Absolutely, yeah. So imagine you've got the best of the best from different agencies like Customs and Border Protection, Coast Guard, all teaming up for some specific mission. That's a joint task force in a nutshell.
Okay.
It's about pooling expertise and resources to tackle the toughest security challenges we've got, right? Head on.
So these bills are all about keeping those task forces running smoothly.
Oh, yeah.
Makes sense. But both bills kind of zero in on one task force in particular, Joint Task Force East.
Right.
Why all the attention on this one?
Well, the bills don't just renew funding.
Okay.
They actually demand a deep dive into how Joint Task Force East is working,
Oh.
especially its headquarters in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Okay.
Congress wants a cost-benefit analysis of that location compared to others.
Oh,
They're
interesting.
not just asking for a report.
Yeah.
They're practically saying, hey, we might want to relocate this thing.
Wait, hold on. They might move the whole headquarters.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal. Why would they even consider that?
Well, think about it like this.
Yeah.
Portsmouth was chosen back when Joint Task Force East was established.
Yeah.
For specific reasons.
Right.
But the world doesn't stand still.
Yeah.
Threats change, priorities shift, and even geography. That can become a factor.
Hold on. Are we talking about climate change here?
Oh, yeah.
Portsmouth is right on the coast, and we all know rising sea levels are a growing concern.
You're sharp. That's definitely a part of this.
Wow.
But it's not just about water levels. Think about what comes with that. Strained infrastructure, more frequent evacuations, potential disruptions to operations. Right?
Yeah.
Climate change, it throws a wrench into every aspect of planning security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So relocating the headquarters could be about adapting to these new climate realities.
We could.
But where could they possibly move it?
Right.
And wouldn't a relocation signal a major shift in strategy?
Possibly, yeah. If you look at these bills closely, Congress isn't just concerned with the location.
Right.
They're looking deeper into staffing levels, resource allocation,
Okay.
even if Joint Task Force East's missions are aligned with the broader goals of the DHS.
So it's not just about where they operate, it's about how they operate.
Absolutely.
This feels less like a routine checkup and more like a top-to-bottom evaluation of Joint Task Force East.
Exactly. And that level of scrutiny suggests that Congress might be sensing a mismatch between the way the task force is set up now, and the evolving security landscape.
Looking at the bills side by side like this,
Yeah.
it's almost like a detective novel. We've got these seemingly mundane legislative documents, but they're actually riddled with clues about potential shifts in national security priorities.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And those clues, they point to some pretty big questions.
Yeah.
What threats are keeping Congress up at night?
Right.
What changes are they anticipating? And what role will Joint Task Force East play in this evolving landscape?
Okay, we've definitely established this is way more than just a rubber stamp situation.
Yeah.
There's a whole story unfolding here. We've got Congress demanding answers, a task force under the microscope, and hints of a major strategic shift. I'm on the edge of my seat. Let's keep digging into these bills. What other intriguing details have you uncovered?
Well, one detail that really jumps out at me is this emphasis on performance metrics.
Okay.
It's like Congress is saying, we don't want reports, we want results. They're demanding evidence, concrete evidence, that Joint Task Force East is actually delivering on its mission. And that brings us to the heart of the matter. What is that mission?
All right, let's get specific. What kind of missions are we talking about?
Well, that's where things get a little more complex.
Okay.
The bills themselves are quite broad, mentioning things like countering threats, protecting critical infrastructure.
Okay.
But reading between the lines,
Yeah.
there are some hints of something bigger at play.
Okay.
For instance, Both bills mandate a detailed assessment of Joint Task Force East's role in combating transnational criminal organizations.
Now, we've all heard about drug cartels and smuggling rings, but how does that connect to Joint Task Force East?
Yeah.
I thought they were focused on things like terrorism and border security.
You're right. That has been their traditional focus.
Right.
But remember, the security landscape is changing rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
These days, the lines between these different types of threats are blurring.
Okay.
What might seem like a simple smuggling operation could have ties to terrorism, to cybercrime, even state-sponsored actors.
So you're saying these criminal organizations are evolving, becoming more sophisticated,
Yeah,
and potentially more dangerous.
potentially, yeah.
And Congress wants to make sure Joint Task Force East is equipped to handle that.
That's exactly what I'm getting at, yeah.
Yeah.
And this raises another key question.
Yeah.
Are the resources currently allocated to Joint Task Force East enough for this expanded mission?
Right.
Remember, Congress specifically requested a breakdown of the task force's budget and how those funds are being used.
So they're not just demanding reports, they're looking at the bottom line.
Absolutely.
They want to know if Joint Task Force East has the money, the manpower, and the technology to keep up with these increasingly complex threats.
They do. And this is where this potential relocation of the headquarters becomes even more significant.
Okay.
If Joint Task Force East is taking on this broader, more challenging mission, it stands to reason that they might need a new base of operation.
Yeah.
One that's better suited to the task.
Okay. I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
We've got a task force facing this more complex threat landscape, Congress demanding accountability and results, and the possibility of a major relocation.
That's a lot.
This is like a high-stakes game of chess.
Yeah.
And we're just starting to understand the opening moves.
Absolutely.
But hold on, there's something else in these bills that caught my eye.
Okay.
They specifically mention the need to assess the task force's progress in implementing these performance metrics.
Uh-huh.
What's the deal with that?
That's a fascinating detail.
Yeah?
It shows that Congress isn't just throwing money at the problem.
Right.
They're demanding data-driven evidence that Joint Task Force East is actually effective. It's not enough to say, hey, we're doing our best.
Yeah.
They need to demonstrate measurable progress towards their goals.
So it's not just about activity, it's about outcomes.
Precisely.
They want to know that Joint Task Force East is actually making a difference.
Exactly. And that brings us to a crucial question.
Okay.
How do you measure the success of a security operation?
Right.
It's not like you can just count arrests or seizures.
Right.
The real impact is often about preventing threats before they even happen, disrupting these criminal networks, creating a safer environment for everyone.
Yeah. That sounds incredibly difficult to quantify.
It is.
How do you put a number on something like preventing a terrorist attack?
Yeah.
Or like disrupting a smuggling ring?
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
And it's one that the DHS and Joint Task Force East are dealing with right now.
Yeah.
They need to develop these sophisticated metrics that capture how complex their work is, right? And they need to be able to demonstrate to Congress that they're making a difference, even if those results aren't always visible to the public.
This adds a whole new layer of complexity to the story.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about budgets and headquarters. We're talking about like the very nature of security and how to measure its effectiveness. And all of this is playing out against the backdrop of a rapidly changing world with new threats emerging all the time.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating and challenging time to be involved in national security.
Yeah.
And these bills offer this unique window into how the U.S. government is adapting to these new realities.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've learned about the crucial role of joint task forces, the specific challenges facing Joint Task Force East, and the intense scrutiny coming from Congress. But there's still so much more to unravel.
Oh, yeah.
In the next part, we'll delve deeper into those potential relocation scenarios and explore what they might reveal about the future of security in the eastern U.S.
Stay tuned, because this is where the real detective work begins.
Okay.
We're going to analyze the clues, connect the dots, and try to anticipate what moves might be coming next in this high-stakes game of national security.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it'll be good.
So we left off talking about these performance metrics and how Congress is basically saying, show us the receipts. They want proof that Joint Task Force East is worth the investment, right?
Right.
But proving that you've prevented something from happening,
Yeah.
that's got to be tricky.
It really is. It's like trying to measure the absence of something.
Right.
You can't just point to a lack of terrorist attacks and say, see, we're doing a great job.
Right.
You need more sophisticated ways to actually demonstrate that impact.
Okay, so how do you measure success in like this shadowy world of national security?
Yeah.
It's not like they're handing out like customer satisfaction surveys after like a thwarted smuggling operation or something.
Right, exactly. It's definitely not that straightforward.
Yeah.
But there are ways to track progress, you know. For example, they could look at, how well is Joint Task Force East disrupting criminal networks?
Okay.
Things like taking down smuggling routes, seizing illegal goods,
Right.
gathering intelligence that leads to arrests further up the chain, right?
So it's about kind of breaking down these big, like invisible goals into these smaller, measurable actions.
Yeah,
Kind of like a domino effect, right?
exactly.
You might not see the final outcome right away,
Right.
but you can see how each piece falls into place.
Exactly. And that's where data analysis and intelligence sharing, that becomes crucial.
Yeah.
Joint Task Force East needs to connect the dots,
Yeah.
spot those patterns and anticipate threats before they fully materialize. I think that's how you actually demonstrate value, even when the results, aren't always making the headlines.
Speaking of connecting the dots, let's
Yeah.
get back to that whole relocation puzzle.
Okay.
We talked about climate change and the need for a base that can like weather the storms, But I have a feeling there's more to it than just like finding higher ground.
You're absolutely right, there is.
Yeah.
Remember, the bills also call for an assessment of whether Joint Task Force East's missions are even aligned with the Homeland Security Act of 2002.
Right.
And that suggests that Congress might be looking for a more fundamental shift in strategy,
Okay.
not just a change of scenery.
Okay, hold on. Remind me, what exactly does that Homeland Security Act lay out?
Oh, sure.
It's been a while since my last government class.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, it's the blueprint for the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay.
It defines its roles, its responsibilities, its priorities.
Right.
It was created in the wake of 9/11
Right.
with a huge focus on counterterrorism and border security.
Yeah.
But the world's changed a lot since then, and Congress might be thinking the DHS needs to adapt its playbook.
So maybe the mission of Joint Task Force East needs to evolve too, right?
Possibly.
But in what direction? We've talked about transnational criminal organizations, but are there other threats on the horizon that might need like a new approach?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
One possibility is that cybersecurity is becoming an even bigger priority.
Yeah.
We've already seen how vulnerable critical infrastructure can be to these cyber attacks.
Right.
And that's only going to become more of a concern as everything from power grids to transportation systems become more and more interconnected.
And if they're thinking about relocating the headquarters, maybe they're looking for a place with like a really strong tech infrastructure, a place that can attract the top talent in cybersecurity and data analysis.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's not just about physical security anymore. It's about information security.
Right.
And that requires a different kind of expertise,
Yeah.
a different kind of workforce.
So instead of just like focusing on guarding the coast, Joint Task Force East might be tasked with protecting like the digital arteries of the nation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty dramatic shift.
Yeah.
But it makes sense when you think about how much our lives depend on technology these days.
Totally.
And it's not just about defense.
Yeah.
It's about offense.
Okay.
The U.S. government is realizing that they need to be more proactive in cyberspace to deter adversaries and disrupt their operations before they can launch attacks.
Right.
That requires a different kind of mindset, different tools, potentially a different location for your headquarters.
Okay. This raises another interesting question.
Okay.
If they're shifting their focus to cybersecurity,
Right.
does that mean like traditional threats like terrorism and smuggling are becoming less of a concern?
I wouldn't say that they're less of a concern, but they might be evolving in ways that require a different approach.
Okay.
Think about it. Terrorist organizations are using online platforms more and more.
Right.
For recruitment, for propaganda, even coordinating attacks.
Right.
Smuggling rings are using really sophisticated technology to move money and goods across borders.
So those lines between different types of threats are getting blurrier all the time.
They are.
It's not just about stopping the bad guys at the border anymore.
Right.
It's about understanding how these threats are interconnected and adapting your strategies accordingly.
Right, exactly. And that's why Congress is demanding this more holistic assessment of Joint Task Force East.
Okay.
They want to know if the task force is equipped to handle this, complex, interconnected threat landscape,
Yeah.
and if its current structure, resources, and location, well, if all that's up to the task.
Thinking about all this, it makes me wonder about the role of international cooperation. Can
Yeah.
the U.S. really tackle these global threats alone?
Right.
Or does Joint Task Force East need to be thinking about partnerships and alliances as well?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
In today's interconnected world, security is not a solo mission.
Right.
Joint Task Force East can't just operate within U.S. borders, even if they relocate. They need to be thinking about these transnational criminal networks, state-sponsored cyber attacks,
Right.
the flow of information and resources across continents.
So maybe part of this whole relocation thing involves finding a location that's not just strategically advantageous within the U.S.,
Right.
but also one that helps with collaboration with international partners. Like a place that's a hub for information sharing, joint operations, and diplomatic engagement.
You're thinking like a true strategist.
Well,
That's exactly the kind of forward-thinking approach that's needed in today's security environment.
Yeah.
We can't just sit back and react.
Right.
We need to be proactive, collaborative, and able to adapt.
This is making me think about those performance metrics again.
Yeah.
If Joint Task Force East is going to be successful in this, new world, right? They need to be able to show not just their own achievements, but also the value they bring to these bigger international efforts.
Absolutely. It's not just about arrests or how much contraband they seize.
Yeah.
It's about how much they're contributing to a more secure and stable global environment.
Right.
And that's a much more nuanced and complex story to tell.
So we've gone from climate change and cybersecurity to international cooperation and the very definition of success in this security world.
Oh, yeah.
These bills are like a Pandora's box of intriguing questions and potential scenarios.
They are. And we're not even done yet.
Oh, there's more.
Remember, these bills also demand that we take a close look at the staffing of Joint Task Force East. Congress wants to know if they've got the right people with the right skills in the right places to actually carry out this evolving mission.
All right, let's talk talent.
Okay.
What kind of expertise is needed to navigate this complex security landscape? And are we talking about recruiting new specialists or retraining people they already have?
That's a great question, and that's actually where we'll pick up in our next segment.
Oh.
Get ready to delve into the world of human capital.
Okay.
Because the success of Joint Task Force East, wherever they end up being located or whatever missions they take on,
right.
Ultimately it comes down to the people on the front lines.
We've talked location, we've talked mission, but, none of that really matters without the right people on the ground. So let's talk about the human element here. What kind of talent are we talking about? Is Joint Task Force East looking for, the next Jason Bourne or a team of coding wizards?
Well, it's kind of both, actually.
Really?
Yeah, you need your boots-on-the-ground operatives who can handle the tactical side of things.
Right.
Investigation, surveillance, interdiction.
Right.
But you also need those analysts who can sift through all that data, connect the dots, anticipate those threats before they even happen.
So we're talking about a blend of traditional law enforcement skills and cutting-edge tech expertise.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique combo.
That's a pretty unique combination.
And it's not easy to find.
Yeah.
These bills specifically call for an assessment of whether Joint Task Force East has the staffing capacity to meet its needs, now and in the future.
Right.
And that's not just about numbers. It's about having the right mix of skills and experience.
So are we talking about recruiting new talent or retraining, the people they already have? Because I imagine it's hard to find someone who's equally comfortable chasing down smugglers and writing code to, thwart cyber attacks.
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
You've got folks with decades of experience in traditional law enforcement, but they might not be up to speed on the latest cyber threats.
Right.
And then you've got your tech whizzes who can navigate the dark web blindfolded, but they might not have the real world experience to understand how those digital threats actually translate into, harm in the real world.
So it's not just about hiring more people, it's about bridging that gap between the physical and the digital worlds. Creating a team where everyone kind of speaks the same language, even if they come from these different backgrounds.
Exactly. And that requires a shift in thinking.
Yeah.
Both in terms of how we recruit
Okay.
and how we train.
Okay.
You need to attract talent from all these different fields,
Mm-hmm.
not just law enforcement and intelligence, but also like tech, finance, even academia. And you
Wow.
need to create training programs that help people collaborate and learn from each other, across disciplines.
It sounds like they're building like a whole new breed of security professional, someone who's as comfortable in a server room as they are in a stakeout.
It really is exciting.
Yeah,
And it speaks to just how much the threats are changing.
right.
It's not enough to just build walls or station guards anymore. You need to be able to think like your adversary,
Sure.
understand what they want, and anticipate their next move.
Which brings us back to those performance metrics. If you're training this whole new generation of security professionals, how do you actually measure their success? What does good even look like in this new world?
It's a great question. And it's one that's being debated right now. Those traditional metrics like arrests and seizures, they're still important,
Yeah,
but they don't tell the whole story anymore.
right.
You need to look at things like, how well are they disrupting these criminal networks?
Okay.
Are they actually deterring cyber attacks?
Mm-hmm.
And are they protecting that critical infrastructure?
So it's like we're shifting from a reactive approach to a proactive one. Instead of just, responding to incidents, we're trying to prevent them from happening in the first place.
Exactly. And that requires a different way of thinking, a different skill set, and a different way of measuring whether you're succeeding.
Right.
It's not just about stopping the bad guys.
Yeah.
It's about building a more secure and resilient society.
So thinking about all of this, it seems like these bills are about a lot more than just authorizing more money for Joint Task Force East. They're about recognizing that the world is changing and that our security apparatus needs to change with it.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
These bills are basically a call to action.
Yeah.
Like, we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them.
Right.
We need to be innovative.
Yeah.
We need to be able to adapt.
Right.
We got to be thinking ahead.
It's almost like these bills are giving us a sneak peek into the future of national security.
Yeah.
A future where the lines between physical and digital threats are blurry, where international cooperation is essential, and where success is measured not just by what you stop, but by what you prevent.
And that's a future that needs a whole new generation of security professionals,
Yeah.
People who are just as comfortable with data as they are with, diplomacy, and as good at cyber defense as they are at working with your communities.
Well, folks, we've reached the end of our deep dive into this world of DHS joint task forces. We've uncovered some really fascinating details about the challenges they face, the resources they need, and the potential changes on the horizon.
We've also seen how these, kind of dry legislative documents can actually give us a peek into how the security landscape is changing. And they force us to ask these tough questions and consider new possibilities.
So as you go about your day, I encourage you to keep thinking about the things we've talked about today.
Yeah.
What role do you think technology should play in security? How can we balance the need for privacy with the need for safety? And what kind of world do we want to create for the generations coming after us?
Because at the end of the day, security is not just the job of governments or law enforcement. It's
Right.
something we all have a stake in.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.